The focus for the administration this week remains on those negotiations between the United States and Iran. You'll remember Saturday morning before the dinner, the president decided not to send special envoys Kushner and Witkoff to Islamabad, Pakistan, over questions about how serious the Iranians were about making a good faith deal. I asked the secretary about the Strait of Hormuz and reports that indicate the Iranians are willing to open it.
Following failed attempts to meet this past weekend in order to engage in negotiation talks in Islamabad, Iran has now proposed a new offer that could potentially end the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. But before I give you all those details, we got to get Cenk's 2 cents.
In it. So look, guys, this war is very far from over. So if you keep hearing Donald Trump say, "Oh, we're almost there," we're going to show you the actual facts here, where we're not even close, and Iran is demanding something that we have said a million times we won't give. But I'm going to tell you after Anna gives you all the facts what the real problem is. So
Trump?
Well,
Israel?
Well, okay, so there is a real problem here. And it's not being talked about nearly enough in the rest of the media. So Anna, go ahead, give them the facts.
Yeah, so before I give you guys the details of what Iran has offered and what the response has been from the Secretary of State already, I just want to remind you all that we're all suffering the consequences of this war already. Gas prices have shot up significantly, food prices have already gone up. We are just beginning to see the impact of this incredibly stupid war that President Donald Trump decided to engage in based on the special, amazing intel by our special ally Israel. And Israel loves it. Israel doesn't want this to end. They want it to keep going. And we are, again, suffering the economic consequences of this. And keep in mind, we as Americans actually have it pretty easy compared to some of the Asian countries that are heavily reliant on oil from Gulf states, including South Korea, including Japan, including some of our actual allies that we have screwed over at the behest of Israel, which is a cancer on this globe. Now, with that in mind, what is Iran's proposal? Well, they want the United States to do something very simple, okay? Lift the blockade on Iranian vessels. If they do that, Iran has agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz. And then after that, the second level of talks and negotiations can deal with the nuclear program that Iranians might want to pursue. And if you are Iran or a leader in Iran, you certainly would want to pursue nuclear weapons at this point because you're dealing with a belligerent pariah state like Israel in your region that's unfortunately aligned with the United States, which is a military superpower. So Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi was in Russia today and explained to reporters why plans to hold talks in Pakistan over this past weekend fell apart. Take a look.
The Americans' approaches caused the previous round of talks, despite the progress that had been made, not to reach its objectives. The excessive demands they made and the incorrect approaches they adopted. It was necessary for us to have consultations with our friends in Pakistan to examine the latest situation. There is a great deal of alignment in views between us, Iran, and Oman, and we also reached agreements for our consultations to continue at the expert level.
All right, so an Iranian official who spoke to Jeremy Scahill over at Dropsite News on the condition of anonymity said, "We're currently moving forward with our own design, and we feel continuing negotiations doesn't make sense until the US government lifts the maritime blockade. The scope of the conflict has expanded, and naturally, the issue is no longer purely nuclear." Hassan Ahmadian, who is a prominent Iranian analyst and an associate professor at Tehran University, also spoke to Dropsite News, saying that the Iranians are saying time is working in our favor for these 3 M's: munitions, markets, and the midterms. These 3 M's help Iran in its position and weaken US positions. And Ahmadian is absolutely right about that. As the Wall Street Journal reported last week, we have depleted 80% of our missile interceptors. Israel is also low on interceptors. And so Iran's like, you guys want to keep going at it? Let's keep going at it. We're the ones who can do some serious damage here militarily, given the depletion of US and Israeli military assets. Ahmadian continues by saying, obviously in the US, they want something to say, quote, "We squeezed Iran and we got this." My perception is that the Iranians are keen to deny the United States that. They wouldn't give what Trump wants as a victory. And here's the problem: Trump has trouble admitting defeat. He's not going to admit defeat, and he's not going to make any concessions to the Iranians, even though the Iranians, whether he likes it or not, certainly do have cards to play here. Now, in regard to what Iran has proposed to the United States in regard to lifting the maritime blockade in order to get the Strait of Hormuz back open, here's what Secretary of State Marco Rubio told Trey Yingst on Fox News.
If what they mean by opening the straits is, yes, the straits are opened as long as you coordinate with Iran, get our permission, or we'll blow you up, and you pay us, that's not opening the straits. Those are international waterways. They cannot normalize, nor can we tolerate them trying to normalize a system in which the Iranians decide who gets to use an international waterway and how much you have to pay them to use it.
Well, I guess that's just a sad day for you, because there's no military way of taking control of the Strait of Hormuz away from the Iranians. And so you have to do something that might be really difficult for the Trump administration: engage in actual diplomacy and come out with a deal so the American people, in fact, the rest of the globe, isn't screwed by the economic devastation that has come along with this stupid war at the behest of the Israelis. So before I continue, Cenk.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So Trump and Israel both went with the philosophy of might makes right. We don't have to follow international law, so we will violate international law in Venezuela in terms of the U.S. And in Iran, and Israel violates international law literally everywhere, right? And they say that they're above the law. Look, one of the biggest problems with political media right now isn't just bias. It's how quickly the same story gets spun into two completely different realities, depending on who's telling it. That's why I recommend Ground News. It's a website and app that pulls together reporting from across the political spectrum so you can compare how the same story is being covered, who's covering it, and what kind of narrative they're pushing. Now take this story about Pete Hegseth refusing to rule out US troops on the ground in Iran. On Ground News, you can immediately see how differently outlets frame that same development. The Daily Signal downplays the danger by stressing that this isn't Iraq and that the war won't be endless. Meanwhile, NBC focused on the important part, that Hegseth would not rule out American boots on the ground in Iran. Same story, two completely different realities. And Ground News makes that obvious right away. You can compare headlines side by side, see the bias distribution of the coverage, check the factuality ratings of the sources, and even see who owns the outlets behind the reporting. That matters because once you understand how stories are being framed, you start to see how public consent gets manufactured. Ground News also has a blind spot feed that highlights stories that one side of the political spectrum is barely covering. So you're not just trapped inside the version of the world your algorithm wants to feed you. If you're tired of being fed somebody else's narrative, I genuinely recommend Ground News. Go to ground.news/TYT or scan the QR code. Using our link gets you 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan. And you could also gift a subscription directly through Ground News. So, okay, well, Iran is saying, well, now my might makes right. Now what are you gonna do about it? You say, oh, I don't have a right to block the Strait of Hormuz. Well, brother, you didn't have a right to invade me. So now two wrongs apparently equal a right, okay? So now I'm blocking the Strait of Hormuz and their 3 M's are totally correct. What are you gonna do about it? Your markets are gonna crash, and your midterms are coming up, and your munitions are running low. So now if you've depleted 80% of your defensive missiles, go ahead, bring your ships into the Gulf. Go ahead, I dare you, right? And then we're at war with you. We have every right to blow up your ships. And so then you could cry about how, oh no, Iran is too strong, and boo-hoo, they shouldn't be allowed to do this. Well, apparently there isn't much we can do about it. So what are you gonna do now? So that's why it was so stupid to go into the war in the first place. We barely had any interest in Iran to begin with, but we decided to start a disastrous war that we couldn't end. So now they're got all the leverage and we're screwed. Now, the most important thing, guys, okay, so first let me tell you one more piece of leverage and then I'll tell you the key factor here. The thing that we're not talking about enough as a country at all is not just the military damage that's been done. We're gonna get to that later in the show. Turns out they've taken out dozens of our planes and our government's been lying the whole time, okay? And it's not just the 400 billion new appropriation that they want, $400 billion more for Israel, trillions and trillions and trillions for Israel's wars. But what they're not calculating in is the economic damage that is going to be done to America and the world as a result of this war. So that could be in the trillions. So not only are gas prices high now, we were worried about $120, oil's already at $109, okay? And the markets still think like idiots that this war is almost over. When they realize that the war is not almost over, that's gonna skyrocket. And then there are the lagging economic indicators. So food prices, aluminum, helium, there's so many other things there. And those don't hit till later because it takes longer for the oil to affect those other products, which then affects their prices. So
and the fertilizer, don't forget that a third of the world's fertilizer comes from that region of the world and is transported through the Strait of Hormuz. So farmers right now are furious. They haven't been able to either get their hands on fertilizer, or if they did get their hands on fertilizer, it's incredibly expensive. Obviously, those costs are gonna be passed down to ordinary people, right? Not just in America, but across the globe. There will be a shortage of food across the globe as well as a result of this.
Maybe they could get Netanyahu and Trump to provide all the manure that they can handle, given all the manure that they're peddling out as fake propaganda to support this war. So now back to, okay, so we've got this economic calamity coming up. That does not even include if the war continues and we bomb Iran's oil and gas facilities and they bomb the Gulf facilities, then we're talking about an economic catastrophe, the likes of which we haven't seen in our lifetimes. So that's gonna come out of whose pocket, guys? Your pocket. And they're not telling you that now, and the media is not asking about it and not talking about it at all, because the media, along with the Democratic leadership, are all secretly in favor of this war, right? Because beloved Israel asked for it, so they all have to pretend that it's such a brilliant idea. They might criticize Trump around the edges on it, but they're not telling you, holy cow, you're gonna get this albatross put around your neck of trillions of dollars of damage that you're gonna have to pay for. And the Israelis aren't gonna pay for it, they're gonna make you pay for it. So the only two guys I've seen mentioning it are Jeffrey Sachs was on Tucker Carlson's show and he talked about it, and Ro Khanna mentioned it on Meet the Press. So now, finally, this is the most important part, guys. So what is preventing the peace? Because we want the Strait open, Iran wants the war to be over, they don't want to be bombed anymore, and they want us to lift a blockade. So why don't we just do that deal? Well, the problem is that we have totally unreasonable demands. We'll get into why in a second, but the things that we're asking for is you open up the Strait of Hormuz, but we don't lift the blockade.
And then that makes no sense.
That doesn't make any sense. No, that's mental. That's saying I don't want a deal. And by the way, press, report on how I don't want a deal because I'm giving them nothing, even though they have the leverage. And the press like, shh, it's all Iran's fault. No. So they say end your entire nuclear enrichment program, give us all the material you've enriched, and you're not allowed to enrich anymore. But Iran said we're not gonna do that from day one, right? And then they say, okay, we want to control your foreign policy, and we demand that you stop defending Lebanon or the Palestinians. You have to give up funding Hamas and Hezbollah. And they're like, hey, idiots, we have the leverage, okay? We're not opening the strait, and we don't care about your stupid huffing and puffing. Like, what do you think this is? You think you're just gonna like trick us into agreeing? This is and so Anna, my sense is that there are two factors as to why we're doing these unreasonable demands. One is Trump is a grade A moron, right? And he doesn't understand anything, that of course Iran is not going to agree to those terms, and he can't countenance losing, which he's already lost. But we're over focusing on that. The second part is that Israel purposely makes these unreasonable demands and insists that we make these unreasonable demands because they don't want the war to be over. And that's why it isn't over.
They certainly do not want the war to be over. You're right about that. But I think that there is a mix of factors here. One being Israel, as you mentioned, but the other being Donald Trump just having a hard time accepting what the reality of the outcome of this war has been so far. It could be that he just thinks we have the strongest, most powerful military, it's impossible for us to lose. It could be that he's given incredibly bad intel by a group of yes men who surround him. I don't know, but what I do know is if I were the president, as hard as it is to eat crow, I would think about how the continuation of this blockade on the Strait of Hormuz hurts. I mean, it hurts everybody across the globe, and I actually genuinely do care about that. But it hurts the American people too. So like, as the leader of the United States of America, do you have any concern about how this is hurting the American people? How people were already struggling economically, and the continuation of this war and the continuation of this blockade makes it far worse? Do you not care about anyone at all in this country? Like, I just don't understand it.
No, of course he doesn't care about anybody else. I think the real question is whether Donald Trump has agency or not. Like, is it that Donald Trump is considering Israel among the different factors, and it's a giant one because they're funding him and Vance? Vance just had dinner with Miri Matelson and Paul Singer and all the Israel First donors, and they're stuffing money in millions and millions into their Trump, Vance, Republican Party's arms. But that's a factor, okay? Money's a factor. Oh, maybe there's other things that are factors for Donald Trump in regards to Israel, or because if that's the case. Then it's not close. He's at 32%. He's about to go into the 20s. He's like, if he continues this war, his entire administration and his legacy will be obliterated. People will absolutely despise him, including his own voters. I'll go on a limb. The majority of his voters will despise him if he continues in this war, because that's how apocalyptic the economic consequences are going to be. Okay, so then you would not do that if Israel was just a factor, okay? The only reason that you would continue is if you don't have a choice, and Israel is, yes, I'll say it, and I think it's perfectly legitimate to say it, that Israel has blackmail on you, and so you can't let people find out the terrible, disgusting things you've done in your life, so you feel like you have no choice. So you keep saying, oh, Lebanon's not part of the deal because Israel wants to continue to invade and occupy Lebanon. But the Iranians say there is no deal if you don't include Lebanon in the deal. So I don't know which one it is, but we're gonna find out, because if we stay in this war, then Israel doesn't have huge influence. They have 100% control over Trump.
Well, I mean, just to bolster that argument, there was a press release put out by the White House. This is an official White House press release. And the whole point of that press release was to justify to the UN Security Council the illegal war that the United States started against Iran. Now, it is an illegal war. Iran didn't attack us, and we decided to attack them and literally kill the Ayatollah, that's pretty unprecedented. That's not something that's supposed to happen, right? Anyway, so the government comes out with this official press release in order to try to defend themselves and justify the war as a legal war. And it's amazing, because you know what they write in it? They literally write, and I'm quoting it verbatim, "The United States is engaged in this conflict at the request of and in the collective self-defense of its Israeli ally." We don't have any security treaty or security pact with Israel at all. So number one, this is not a justification for starting an illegal war with Iran. Arguing that we did it because Israel requested it, though, I'm glad that they put that on paper in an official White House press release. So as much as Israel's vocal defenders in this country want to make it seem as though Trump made this decision on his own and that Israel had nothing to do with it, Israel had everything to do with it. In fact, I guarantee if Israel was not an ally of the United States, we wouldn't go to war with Iran, a country of 92 million people.
Not even close. We have there's no reason to go to war with Iran. Netanyahu said as soon as the war started, this is the culmination of my 40-year plan. And his plan was for us to attack 7 countries, and guess what we've done? We've attacked all 7 countries that Israel wanted us to attack. They had nothing to do with us, everything to do with Israel. And so now cable news guys will see that, us literally saying officially, we did this for Israel, that's our justification. And then they'll turn around and say, how dare you? That has nothing to do with it. It's conspiratorial, it's anti-Semitic. So is the US government anti-Semitic?
I guess
because
so.
they just said, we did it for Israel, and they put it down on paper. So guys, last thing is, how is this thing going to end if it's going to end? So because then, in order to know that, you have to know why we actually started the war. And it has nothing to do with enrichment. In fact, Israel's been trying to get us out of the nuclear deal the entire time, because the nuclear deal that Obama did made sure that they couldn't enrich uranium. And so that robbed Israel of the excuse they wanted for their actual purposes. And their actual purposes is twofold. One's about Iran and one's about Lebanon, okay? Lebanon's easy. They want to have the whole world distracted and use American troops, et cetera, to attack Iran. And while they go into Lebanon and steal southern Lebanon, and then they get the American media to go, they were doing self-defense, they're the victims, and all the lies and propaganda. And hey, look at that neat little magic trick, we gain more territory for Greater Israel. And you could see with your own eyes they're doing that now. And then the second reason is in Iran, they wanted a regime change. Now that's impossible, but they had a backup plan. The backup plan is civil war, same thing that they did in Syria and in Libya and in Sudan. So this is a worn path that the Israelis have created. Why do they create civil wars where tons of people die and it lasts decades and it destroys the country?
Because they love it?
Because, well, no, okay, maybe they also
certainly do.
Terrorists are sadistic by nature, and that is the entire Israeli government, obviously. But really, the main objective reason is because then that country is too distracted to be able to fund anything that helps the Palestinians or the Lebanese or anyone that Israel is stealing land from. So that's why they want Iran destroyed. So if they want Iran destroyed, which is still possible, and they want to steal southern Lebanon, well, they need the war to keep going. And if we leave, guys, this is really important. According to some analysts, I'm not a military expert, but Israel couldn't last a day without us in these wars. So if that's the case, they're never going to let us out of their vice grip.
Unless you actually have like real leaders in this country.
No chance. I mean, yes, in 2028, but as things stand now, almost like Schumer, JD Vance, Hakeem Jeffries, and Donald Trump, the four main, you throw in Mike Johnson, the five main leaders in this country, in both the Republican and Democratic Party, their number one donor lifetime is the Israeli lobby. They completely and utterly work for the Israeli lobby, and they will do exactly as they are commanded and ordered by the government of Israel. And anyone who says, no, hundreds of millions of dollars don't affect these greasy scum politicians is an obvious liar and not a reporter.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.